It's very, very possible that our biggest barrier to what we want is inside of our skull. If we don't start there and ask the question, how do I think that this ought to work? That may not include some things that are needed to make it work. What am I thinking about this that may not apply to what I'm trying to do, what I need to learn? What self-doubt, what self-criticism? I mean, just take that one. You go to casting vision. I've seen leaders, they've had the greatest product or idea or whatever, and they got to go raise money and they got to cast a vision. They go to Silicon Valley or somewhere and they got to cast a vision to these really smart people, VCs and all that. And they get up there and a little voice starts to say, well, why are they going to believe me? I've never done anything. Why would they? Okay, once that starts to happen, what happens is the brain changes, and everybody knows all the biochemistry involved in this, and the cortisol goes up and the adrenals go up and the prefrontal cortex shuts down. But not only that, the chemistry of the attraction and the buy-in, even in sales, there's an interpersonal dyad that happens that comes from your own brain and the energy and the connection and asking people and getting people to come in that space. Well, that voice that stopped it all is in your head. So we better deal with that one.
Welcome to Franklin Covey's On Leadership. I'm your host, Jennifer Colosimo. Every leader knows the frustration of having a clear vision, but hitting a wall when it comes to execution. When teams stall out, our default instinct is to demand more effort. But psychology tells us that getting stuck often isn't about motivation. There are structural elements missing that impact engagement and ability to execute. Our guest today is familiar to our longtime listeners. He was one of our first guests when we launched this podcast and returns today to discuss his highly anticipated book, Your Desired Future: The 5 Essential Steps That Take You Where You Want to Go. Dr. Henry Cloud is a renowned clinical psychologist, an elite executive coach and keynote speaker, and a New York Times best-selling author with over 20 million books sold worldwide. He also brings a unique operational perspective, having co-founded and run a massive healthcare organization spanning dozens of markets. He is here today to discuss the 5 essential steps every leader needs to take to break through inertia and deliver results. Dr. Henry Cloud, welcome to On Leadership.
Good to be with you, Jen.
We are glad to welcome you back. You and I were talking at the beginning that you were one of our first guests when the podcast launched 7-8 years ago.
Wow.
So we're excited to talk about your new book, Your Desired Future, today. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. I can't believe it's been that long. Where does time go?
I know. Well, there was a different host at the time, but luckily I get to talk with you today. I'm really excited to start in with the book. You use these 5 elements to lead us to a path to our desired future, and you use the human body as a metaphor. Could you briefly walk through your steps and the metaphor?
It's kind of weird to me. I mean, it is a metaphor, but it's kind of weird to call it a metaphor because to me, it's much, much deeper than that. It's a model, really. There's no greater performance machine, more complex, more systems, more abilities than the way the human body is designed to get from here to there. And so I went, you look at all the leadership, there's so many topics, and how do we pick between change management and strategy and execution? And I thought it would be helpful to have a little model that leaders and high performers could look at, sort of like a GPS, and say, give me a reading on, am I doing what's required to get something from here to there? And that's where the model came from. But I looked at the human body and I got interested in how does it do it? Because what a design. And Jen, it just blew me away. Because when you get into the neuroscience and the neuroanatomy and the physiology and the psychology of what the human body does to literally hear what's leadership, we want to get from here to there. It looks at where I am, right? Where are we? And then it comes up with, in the prefrontal cortex, it comes up with something that only the human species can do. It can see and create a desired future state that does not exist today. Now, in the popular language, we call that a vision. But you begin to look at the components of what that vision must entail, like if where your sales are, or where your culture is, or where the team's operating, where your marriage is, or how your kids are, whatever is here. And we see a better future. Martin Luther King said, I see a day when a man is judged by the quality of his character, not the color of his skin. That didn't exist. That's a vision. Everybody knows about vision, but you got to get into the actual components that have to be present in that vision to then get the system activating everything that's going to happen. So the human body comes up with okay, it'd be better, Jen, it's great talking to you here, but it'd be better if we were talking over there. Now I got my vision. But what does the body do next? The next thing it does, and if you watch this, watch my brain go there. It's not going anywhere by itself.
Yes, I watched you and nothing moved.
Nothing moved. And so when we come up with a vision, the next crucial question is, what talent do I need to engage past myself that's going to get me there? And what the brain does is it sends out recruiting emails. I'm going to need a couple of legs. I'm going to need a couple of eyes to balance. I'm going to need a couple of inner ears to balance, eyes to focus and see where I'm going. Little finger. No, you don't really apply to this one. And it brings the talent together either inside the organization or outside of the organization, in the real world. What talent is required to make this happen? Because I don't have all the talents. I don't have all the abilities. So now we got the legs and then okay, let's go. Well, wait, the third one, how are we going to get there? And then I go, well, I could call an Uber. Well, that doesn't really fit the market, the context. I could ride a scooter. You know what? I think the best way to win, the best way to get there is I'm going to walk. So when your brain comes up with that strategy, it immediately develops a plan that's going to execute that strategy that asks 3 questions. Who's going to do what when? And the legs are going to take a certain amount of steps at a certain time and this, that, and the other. And we got a plan that actually defines the activities that move the needle on the strategy. These are what are properly called, the leading indicators. It's like people just measure, are we getting there by their goal? That's too late. It's like a football team looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game in order to win it. Now, you've got to, are we measuring, are we doing what's actually going to move the needle? And your brain comes up with number 4, a measurement and accountability system to ask the question, am I doing what we said we were going to do? And if not, why? And then it comes up with, well, we veered off a little bit. Then the 5th one kicks in. You got to quickly fix and adapt, solve that problem. Problems are normal. You're going to do it. You're going to miss it. You're going to screw up. But if it's identified quickly, what the body does is it quickly gets back on track. Because here's the deal. Everybody has problems. Problems unsolved quickly become patterns. Problems won't wreck you. Patterns will kill you. And so that's what the human body does. And so then what I got into was, well, everybody knows about these things. I mean, I was worried that the publisher would put these 5 things on the cover. Well, I know about vision. I know about strategy. But everybody knows about them. But there's two problems. Do we have the essential components of each one of those that actually make them work? And number 2, none of us are naturally inclined to do all five. There are people that are great vision, strategy, big picture, but they just lose steam on the measurement and accountability. And there are other people that will measure the heck out of everything, but they're not good strategists. That's fine. But you just got to sit above it and look at it and ask the question, I don't have to do them all, but all five of these happening in what I'm trying to do? And that'll be the key.
We know the world is disruptive right now. So, this episode, I want to give you two different ways to strengthen your leadership and turn disruption into your competitive advantage. Franklin Covey's guide, Too Much Disruption, Too Little Leadership, takes a deep dive into the dynamics of disruption, the high costs of burnout and disengagement, and what leaders can do today to foster connection and performance. You can grab your free copy from the show notes now. And don't forget, I'll be joining leadership expert and New York Times bestselling author Liz Wiseman for a Franklin Covey webcast to help leaders close the capability gap and drive better performance. Follow the link in the show notes to reserve your free spot and gain actionable strategies to boost engagement and sustain results. Now, back to the show. Well, you were talking about, yes, it's common sense, but not common practice for a variety of reasons. And, as we work with mid-level leaders, executive leaders, and I'd love to hear how you've seen this take place as you work with organizations, something is missing. Either the vision isn't clear or they go straight from vision to execution without outlining strategy. You mentioned lead measures.
Or having the right, engaging the right talent and knowing how to.
Or engaging the right talent. They're not looking at their talent architecture. Something's missing even though they know them. Is there one that you see stand out where this breaks down most often, or does it vary widely with the organizations and leaders you work with?
It's such a good question. And we all naturally do that. It reminds me, I was doing an event one time with a Q&A, and a lady asked a question. Okay, it was about parenting, and she said, okay, if there's one thing that you could tell parents, there's one thing to raise successful kids, what would that be? And I go, well, there's not one thing. And she go, but if you did, if there was what? I go, there's not one thing. I mean, you want air, water, or food? Pick one. And she goes, yeah, but if there, I go, okay, if there was one thing, I would tell them, raise my kids to not grow up and ask stupid questions. There's not, and we want to do that, but air, water, or food. Now, there are a few things that we have to do. So, for example, if you take any one of these five, if an airline pilot has a great vision and great, talent, he's got a co-pilot, a navigator, and you got the tower monitoring, all the people are in place, are going to get you there. You got a great strategy. We're going to take a 757, and we got a great flight plan, 540 knots, 280 degree heading, altitude 30,000 feet. But what if we have no measurement and accountability? Now you fly in a plane without an instrument panel. Mm-hmm. And you go off 2 degrees. If you're leaving New York and you go off 2 degrees, well, if that becomes a pattern, you're going to end up some other part of the world. So that's why it's hard to say one. So here's the way that I've come to answer that. It's the one you're not doing. That's the most important thing. It's the one you're not.
Said well. And also that if it becomes a pattern, it's the patterns that really kill you. You might make a mistake here, you might make a mistake there. Right. But I think that's why the underlying idea of the human body is so valuable when you're starting this book, because to your point, well, your brain's got to work, your heart's got to work, all the pieces have to work. And if one doesn't, it becomes the focus so that it's not a pattern to take the others down.
Yeah. I mean, Jen, how many times in your coaching Have you gone in and something's going on, something's not right, they ask you to come help, and you go back to the leader, to the CEO or whoever's heading that department, and you go, you are one hire away from success. You look at the table and what your strategy is and what y'all are trying to do and what you're depending on working. Like I talked to a company that morphed into the whole strategy is now we're going to become digital. So I said, well, tell me about your technology, your IT person. Who's that? And they go, oh, so and so. Well, why isn't he at the table or she at the table? And they go, well, he is, but he reports to the CFO. Your whole strategy depends on, and now you've got this person and they didn't know the social aspects of that. They didn't know the analytics. They knew how to make the equipment work. Or when Tom Brady got called to go win a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that hadn't made the playoffs in like 10 or 15 years. And he takes that job after winning 6 Super Bowls or something. The first thing he did was he looked at the team. The vision was clear, we're going to win a Super Bowl. He looked at the team. He said, you'll never win a Super Bowl with that talent. There's 3 positions that are weak that we cannot win a Super Bowl with. He went personally and recruited the best talent for those 3 positions. The next year they won the Super Bowl. But it's the one you're not doing. It's the one that's missing because you're probably doing the other ones pretty well. And it's like, your legs are strong. Your muscles are strong. You got a splinter in your big toe. You're not going to win the race because you're, you got to have
Right.
all 5.
You got to have all 5. You tell a story in the book as a co-founder, trained as a clinical psychologist, but a co-founder of a fairly large inpatient, outpatient healthcare system. And that you went to, I don't know if it was a lunch or a dinner with your partner, your co-founder.
Yeah.
Would you share a little bit about that story and the difference that made from a talent standpoint? Back to the Tom Brady and the going digital story.
Well, and not only talent is a vision problem too. And one of the things that I talked about in the book, in all 5, we will do these 5 in our own image, the way we're wired to do it. And so I had the dream and I was in my 20s. I didn't know how hard this stuff was. I wanted to do an inpatient psych unit that had the design of the milieu and the treatment that was my own operating system, because at that time you check patients into a hospital, each doc was kind of doing their own thing, the nursing staff was doing their own thing, the groups, and it wasn't integrated. I wanted something that had a a system to it, right? And so I thought the only way to do that is to be in control. And how do you get control? Well, you own the hospital. So I said, well, I'm going to buy a hospital. I didn't have 2 dimes to put together, but I went out and raised the money to buy a hospital, and we couldn't get a deal to go through. So then I had to adapt, right? And I approached an existing med-surg hospital and talked them into giving me a wing, converting it from peds to psych or something. And I'll manage it, run it, this, that, and the other. And so we started. Now, that was my vision. So what I did was I built it in my own image. I was a private practice practitioner. So we built the model where, on referrals, people call and you put them into treatment. Well, we also were doing a call-in radio show. This is in Los Angeles. That became kind of a big deal in the market. And we were getting gazillions of calls. We did drive time every day in LA. That's a big deal. If you've ever seen the 405 freeway, people are stuck. And so the show was at 6 p.m., I think. And we were having dinner afterwards. And somebody invited a friend of theirs to come have dinner with us, but he came early and he sat in for the radio show. And so he's watching all this. And so after the show, we go to dinner. And he says, gosh, what you guys have done here is incredible. And, it was working. And he said, but you don't realize what you have. He said, where's your call center? And I looked at him and I said, what's a call center? And now, what I didn't know
I'm
was,
not laughing at you. We know your age. It's still just, At least you were genuinely not pretending you knew.
No, I didn't know. Now I am laughing at
Mhm.
it. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, you're supposed to be ready, aim, fire. I was fire, ready, aim. But I said, what's now? What I didn't know was this guy had been the COO of a very large chain of drug and alcohol treatment centers that was national. He had a big, liquidity event in his early 50s and retired, and he was going to cruise for a while. And he said, "Well, you've got all these calls coming in. Who takes them and follows up to them and helps them get into treatment, does the insurance authorizations and this, that, and the other?" And we were kind of like, "Well, our office does that." And he goes, "But what about the call bank has 100 somethings calls?" I go, "I don't know," but I realized, wow, there's a lot about this thing we're doing that we don't know because we were private practitioners. Now we've got a healthcare entity, or at least one. And so we started talking. And I said, "You know what? I bet there's a lot of stuff we don't know. You're not doing anything. Would you come in and do an audit for a month? Look at everything we're doing and do an audit." And he did that. And he came back, and I'll never forget this. I said, "So what do we need?" And he started laughing. He said, "You need somebody like me." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You have a great vision. You got great stuff going on, but there's a lot of healthcare operations that you're not doing and you don't know. And this thing could be really something that you never imagined." And I go, "Okay, well, come join us." And he goes, "I'm not going to do that." He said, "I just retired." But anyway, engaging the talent, he caught the vision and he came on. Well, we had we had something that was good. We were helping people. It was research, much better than industry standards, doing great, getting great results. But I didn't know anything about scaling. I didn't know anything about. And long story short, we ended up in 45 markets in the Western United States, um, 4 states, and did that very successfully for the next decade. And then healthcare started to change, and the insurance industry started to change. I sold the company, but it was about engaging the right talent and knowing enough to know I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
And
Yes. It's such a great story that illustrates focusing on the one you don't have.
right,
Right? Or what's not exactly working. Um, you know, Obviously you've had that success both as a clinician and a provider, a business provider, and you've sold over 20 million books. I'm really familiar with boundaries, integrity. What about, was there anything in the environment now, in your life now, that drove you to focus on this topic, your desired future? Anything happening that said, this is where I want to go now?
yeah, it's kind of like um, I'm not an author. I mean, people say, "Oh, you're an author." I go, "I'm really not an author. I'm a practitioner. I spend 80 to 100 days a year in the war rooms with CEOs and teams and boards and their cultures and designing enterprise wide projects and all of that. That's what I love." But what happens is, I always say, I don't write books, the work writes the books, because I I see things that, and we fix things and grow things. And I always look for, well, what's a model that would help them understand what we're doing. I've always been a model builder. And so I would go into organizations, and there's so much leadership stuff. And I'd say, well, as leaders, as executive team, for example, you're leading this company. What are you doing? As leaders, what are you doing? I'd pass out 3x5 cards around the table, take 2 minutes and answer that question: what is leadership? And I'd get 12 different answers or 8 different answers. How many, like I said earlier, how many people sitting there? That's how many answers I got. And I just thought it'd be very helpful to have a little model that was like a GPS that they could look at every day and answer the question: what's missing? What do I need to focus on? And so what happened, you're asking about what happened today that made me write the book about it. I've been using this model for probably 15 years at least or more. And I would use it in my consulting. And then I started to have really big multi-billion dollar enterprises that had been there for a while adopting it as their operating system all the
Their
way.
operating system for leadership.
Yeah, and execution and all of that, and then and taking
Mhm.
their teams through it and taking the whole culture through it, all the way to small businesses, all the way to, and if I can tell you a quick story about this, it kind of motivated me. Our youngest daughter, Lucy, is a musician, singer songwriter, and she's 23 now. Is that right? No, she's 24. I should know this. Uh,
Let's edit that part out. But Lucy's either 20, she's 24 now.
yeah, and and she came to me when she was about 16 or 17, and she said, "Dad, how do people become singer songwriters?" And I said, "Well, why do you ask?" Because I knew she was. I never had heard her say, "That's what I want to do." She said, "That's what I want to do." I go, "Well, tell me about it." And she started to describe it. And I said, "Okay, Lucy, how do they become singer songwriters? How do you get from here to there?" I'm going to show you. I literally brought my big whiteboard into the kitchen, and she rolls her eyes and goes, "Oh gosh, here comes
Oh yeah, here comes Dad with his professional
the
advice.
life lesson. One more life lesson for today."
Mhm.
So I said, "The first thing is you got to have your vision. Tell me about your vision." And she told, I was blown away how clear and compelling and all the pieces that it had. I said, "Great, Liz, you got that." The second thing though is you got to engage the talent that's going to take you there. And she looked at me, Jen. She goes, "Well," kind of crestfallen. She goes, "Well, you and Mom said I have talent." I said, "You do,
Mhm.
Lucy. I'm not talking about your talent. I'm talking about what other talent do you need to join you to help you get there." You know, Jen, she instantly got it. She said, "Oh, I need a new guitar teacher." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because we just keep doing the same thing over and over. I'm not getting better. I got to go on YouTube to learn new chords." I said, "Great." We put that down. "What other talent?" She goes, "Well, I need to start performing in front of audiences. But how do you get auditions?" I go, "I don't know, but we have friends at local playhouses and school stuff, and we'll go ask them, and they'll get you in some auditions." So we did that.
Yep.
And then she said, "How do you publish a song or produce a song? I mean, I make stuff on GarageBand," she said, "but how do you get it on professional? You know, it's got to be mixed." And I don't know how to do that. I said, "I don't know." And here's where she really got lucky. I think it's providential. Kevin Jonas, you know, the Jonas Brothers. Kevin
Of
Jonas,
course.
he, the dad who produced
Mhm.
them and managed them all the way up to whenever, he heard her sing. And he said, "I haven't heard that since like Demi Lovato or something. I want to manage you." And so he came in and said, "Let's get an album done." Well, anyway, long story short, they did. And one of the songs from that first release, CBS television bought it for a network show. The CW network bought it. She got featured on all the platforms, MTV, SiriusXM, all that stuff. But here's the point: none of that would have happened. She would have had a dream, but getting from here to there, she didn't have a path to work to work to get there. And so getting to the why now, when I started to see, gosh, this could be usable for every area of life. How does a depressed person get undepressed? How does a multi-billion dollar business go from where they are in market share today to there? And I really saw this is kind of these are just universal laws of how things work. And that's kind of, well, I'll write the book. I won't just use it in consulting. I'll get a tool.
I'll write the book.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I love, obviously, great stories. Lucy, you're building a business, the Tom Brady story. And you really do have a mix of you need to believe, obviously, and realism in this book, right? Because not everybody, I mean, not everybody who sets out like Lucy did is going to meet Kevin Jonas. Not everybody's Tom Brady. And you even say some things in the book about, yes, there's a mix between you need to believe, you need to have the vision, it has to be in your mind, which we at Franklin Covey always say mindset before, behavior.
Yes.
Tell me how you balance out belief. We need to believe in what we're going to do, even the human body, to, yeah, but I am not going to be a WNBA player. I'm not tall enough and I'm old.
Yeah. Yeah. There's if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Well, I'm a competitive golfer, have been my whole life. I can dream of winning the Masters. It ain't going to happen. Right. So here's what we know about belief. It's not like the law of attraction says that if I can believe it and see it, the Rolls Royce is going to show up at my door. Okay. But it is the number one factor that loads on whether a goal is achieved. A lot of people think it's motivation. If you want it bad enough, you can do it. Well, motivation is important, but it wanes. You cannot depend on it. Motivation will go up and down for a variety of reasons. We need it. When it goes down, we got to get it back, all that. But I'm not going to walk across the room if I don't believe that that's possible. Okay. A lot of people get stopped right there. And a lot of that is personal. And they make this funny little morph into, yeah, I believe it's possible, but not for me. And that's when their self-doubt and all this stuff kind of gets in the way. So here's what I found is very helpful about that. If it's got to have some sort of objective reality to it, like you're saying. Am I going to win the Masters? Well, let's look at this. Has anybody ever, at my age and my distances and my putting ratio and all of that, and is that going to happen? No, it's just not going to happen. But I can adjust that vision to what fits reality. Even SMART goals say this. But here's the big point here. Whatever most of the people listening to this podcast are dreaming of, conceiving, like you said, we can check off the belief box in 5 seconds. Whatever you're probably dreaming of, starting a business in that industry that works and makes money, or getting to that amount of market share, whatever, look outside. Somebody is doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And somebody's doing it that is your height
Yes.
or your age or is as broke as you are. And we can check that one off the list. Yes, this is possible. I believe that this is possible. Now, if I have issues that get in the way, I got to believe I can grow. I can learn. One of the most important things you will ever learn in life, ever, 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 is when you learn that you can learn. Because we look at what we don't know, and I don't know how to do that, and I've never done that before. So what? You can learn. I didn't know how to scale a healthcare company. If I had said, well, I don't know how to do that, and no, but I learned that I could learn. I need a teacher. I need a coach. I need a consultant. I need people that have done this. And when you learn that you can learn, then the belief things really begin to get massaged in a way that the knots can get out of your neck, and it starts to change. So no, you can't have psychotic fantasies that have no basis. I mean, unless you're Elon, he actually dreams of stuff that
there are people that can, but we know their names, and the whole world knows their names. But
even go to that one. Go to that one. He knows enough physics and back when, that he really believed all that was possible, not because it was a fantasy, but there was objective reality to that a lot of people miss. And a lot of this is in our heads. If I'll ask the question sometimes, where did Google come from? Everybody go, well, Silicon Valley and the technology revolution, all this. I would say, no, that's not where it came from. Where it came from was a graduate student named Larry Page from Michigan. And he went to Stanford. He goes to a leadership development camp experience, graduate student. They taught him a mantra, and here was the mantra: have a healthy disregard for the impossible. And he just kept that in his head, which means we dream up stuff. Oh, that's impossible. No, just disregard that it's impossible. So one day he wakes up, and coming out of his sleep, he has a thought: what if we downloaded every URL on the entire internet and saved it? What if we did that? Well, most of us would go, well, I don't have enough RAM. My hard drive's
Yeah.
not big, especially back
No
then.
processing power.
Disregard the impossible. He said, what could we do with that? And they went out and did it. Well, then now we have search engines, and the rest of the story. A lot of people, they come from an environment, or they come from a family, or they come from a previous company, or a mentor, or set of parents that taught them these mantras that aren't true. Like, well, it takes money to make money, and I don't have any money, so I'm not going to. That's not true. It doesn't have to be your money, and it doesn't always even have to be money. These things aren't true. But if you don't get out of your neighborhood and see how this is working, this is why some of the great leaders I work with, they go visit other industries and watch how do they do. Because in our industry, everybody does it like this. Well, it's like the Medici effect. They go over here and they go, well, wait a minute, what if we applied what this industry does to. They get out of their neighborhood. It's so important. Get out of your neighborhood.
Continuous learning, which you've said repeatedly. And obviously, you can see your executive coach capability coming through in the great questions that you ask people to uncover, from Lucy to your clients, right? Asking them questions to really challenge that limiting belief.
If we don't understand, first of all, that it's very, very possible that our biggest barrier to what we want is inside of our skull. If we don't start there and ask the question, how do I think that this ought to work, that may not include some things that are needed to make it work? What am I thinking about this that may not apply to what I'm trying to do, what I need to learn? What self-doubt, what self-criticism? I mean, just take that one. You go to Casting Vision. I've seen leaders, they've had the greatest product or idea or whatever, and they got to go raise money, and they got to cast a vision. They go to Silicon Valley or somewhere, and they got to cast a vision to these really smart people, VCs and all that. And they get up there, and a little voice starts to say, well, why are they going to believe me? I've never done anything. Why would they? Okay, once that starts to happen, what happens is the brain changes, and everybody knows all the biochemistry involved in this, and the cortisol goes up, and the adrenals go up, and the prefrontal cortex shuts down. But not only that, the chemistry of the attraction and the buy-in, even in sales, there's an interpersonal dyad that happens that comes from your own brain and the energy and the connection and asking people and getting people to come in that space. Well, that voice that stopped it all is in your head. So we better deal with that one. I worked with with an NBA player, everybody would know, ones who hit a free throw slump. I mean, this person was great, but they weren't making any free throws. You get him out on the court. I mean, come on. This guy knows how to make it from the free throw line. It's not a test.
By the time you're in pro basketball, knows how to make a free throw.
So you get, here was my method. This is in his head. It says, stand at the free throw line. You get a million balls. Just start firing them. He makes every one of them from the free throw line. Why? Because the voice didn't have time to talk to him. He got lost in the flow. And yet, this is, I'm a golfer, and golfers will talk about, like Csikszentmihalyi chronicled, they'll get into the flow, where the parts of the brain that shut down performance and reduce IQ and reduce chemistry and reduce forward motion and cause paralysis and can reduce your IQ by like 15 or more points, a whole standard deviation based on what's happening in here. So can't say enough about it.
Yes. Well, and I find everything you're talking about applicable, of course, in athletics and in doing a pitch deck for VCs, but also for mid-level leaders,
100%.
Mid-level team leaders that aren't able to cascade the vision or follow the steps with measurement and adaptability, or aren't continuously learning. I mean, leaders across the board, a lot of what is so great about your book is it does start with the cognitive component and how it drives the result, your desired future.
That's right, the vision. I actually opened the book with a story about our Doberman. I love the big working breeds. I've had 5 German Shepherds, a Rottweiler, and now Finley, our Doberman. And Finley has a mission. She's got a job. Okay. Her job, besides loving the family, Dobermans are the sweetest dogs. I mean, you'll never find, they're like Velcro. They got to be like next to you all the time. But her job is to guard the house. And she does it amazingly. Delivery, FedEx, Amazon, they come to the front door, get out of the way, because she goes to the front door and they like throw the package on the porch and run, even though there's a door regarding it. But she does it perfectly until one of us goes, Finley, friend, calm, and then her ears go back because it's not a stranger and she knows. All right. So but she's doing it the way she's wired. But I've never heard Finley run to the front door like that, do her bark, sit back and go, I wonder if that was helpful. I wonder if I barked at the right time. And then ask the bigger question, I wonder if the way I barked will get me closer to where I want to be on Thursday. That's the desired future. The human species, we're the only ones that have that capacity. And if we don't start there, in any endeavor, whether it's a team or parenting or, whatever, we'll be like Alice in Wonderland, who came to the crossing of the road, and the Cheshire Cat's sitting there, and she goes, which way do I go? And the Cheshire Cat goes, well, where are you trying to get to? She goes, I don't know. He said, well, I guess it doesn't matter then too much, does it? And she said, well, I want to end up somewhere. He said, oh, you will.
You'll end up somewhere. You'll end up somewhere.
And so that becomes really important. What did Stephen say? Begin with
the end in mind.
The human species is the only one that has that capacity. And you can create way more than the voices in your head are telling you, or that the missing piece that you don't know about and aren't good at are causing you to not get to. What a human.
Really helpful. Really helpful. Thank you so much for joining us for the second time. We hope there's a third with your prolific writing and all of your work. Thank you so much, Dr. Henry Cloud. And we will see the rest of our listeners on our next On Leadership.
Thanks, Jen.